A disturbing scene of a woman's lifeless body starts off the movie. Her eyes are wide open. Beside her bed are pictures of her and her daughters. She's a single mother of two who succumbs to her death with a drug overdose. Outside the room is the youngest of the sisters, Rose, who watches in horror at the sight of her dead mother. In the current time, Rose has now become a therapist, helping patients in the psychiatric ward. Her patient at that time is Carl, who repeatedly utters he is going to die. Rose tries to console him before putting him under observation for a few days. She is then called to the office of her superior, Dr. Desai, who tells her not to accept more patients without insurance since the board is going after him for it. Rose is called in for another patient named Laura Weaver. Laura is a graduate student now suffering from symptoms of depression after she witnessed her professor, Gabriel Munoz, hammering himself to death days prior. Laura explains that she's not losing her mind and says that she is seeing something that pretends to be people. Sometimes those she knows, and it has already taken over her life. She also adds that every time she sees this thing, it has a smile on its face. Not the welcoming smile, but the most terrifying she had ever seen in her life, but no one believes her. Rose tries to calm her down and rationalizes it as some kind of trauma. Suddenly, Laura starts acting terribly afraid and collapses on the floor, screaming as if she sees something horrendous inside the room. Rose calls the medical staff for help, but as soon as she gets off the phone, Laura is now smiling in front of her, as if nothing happened. Using a piece of the broken vase, Laura cuts her face down to her throat, taking her own life in the process. Rose watches in horror as the paramedics arrive. After the incident, two detectives arrive to get Rose's statement. One of them is Joel, Rose's ex-boyfriend. They start asking questions about Laura, deeming her as mentally incapacitated. Rose mentions the creepy smile on her face before she died. Later, Rose returns home. To relax from the terror she witnessed earlier, she grabs a bottle of champagne. As she pours herself a drink, she catches a glimpse of someone standing in the corner. As she stares in the corner, trying to figure out what it is, someone speaks, startling her. It was her fiancé, Trevor. He asks her what's wrong, and she confides that her patient died that day. Later that night, they meet with Holly, Rose's sister, to catch up over dinner. However, Rose seems distracted. Her mind is somewhere else, and she didn't hear what Holly said about her nephew's birthday this coming weekend. They comment negatively about how Rose would still prefer to work for free when she could earn good money. Rose suddenly snaps and yells at them, which ends up ruining the night. The next morning, Rose returns to the hospital and receives a call from Holly, apologizing for last night. She looks out the window and sees someone resembling Laura outside, staring at her. But she dismisses the sight and decides to go check on Carl. However, when she gets there, she sees the familiar creepy smile on his face, telling her she's going to die. She immediately calls for help, but it turns out that Carl has been sleeping the entire time, and what happened was only a hallucination. When Dr. Desai hears about the incident, he tells Rose to take a week off for her well-being, which she reluctantly accepts. At home, Rose starts wrapping the gift for her nephew's birthday when the alarm suddenly rings. Their back door is unlocked. As she anticipates someone coming in, a security officer calls her and weirdly tells her to look behind her back. Before she can turn her head, the telephone rings again. Turns out she's hallucinating again. The real security officer then calls the police to check on her house, but they find nothing. Trevor arrives and asks Rose if she's okay. She then prepares her cat, Mustache's, dinner, but he's not around. Over the next few days, Rose starts to experience more unexplainable things, like hearing and seeing something. Concerned about her own mental well-being, she decides to consult her old therapist, Dr. Madeline. She explains what she's been going through and asks for medications, but Dr. Madeline tells her it must be episodes of the trauma from her childhood, caused by her mother. On the weekend, Rose attends her nephew Jackson's birthday. All goes well until the opening of the gifts, when Jackson pulls out Mustache's dead body from Rose's gift box. She begins to go hysterical while hugging her beloved cat. When she looks around, frantically trying to convince everyone that she didn't do it, she sees Laura among the guests, smiling at her. This causes her to fall onto the glass table, injuring her wrists. When they arrive home, she tries to explain to him what's been happening to her, but he refuses to listen. He speculates that Rose has inherited her mother's mental illness. Rose decides to investigate deeper into the case of Gabriel Munoz, so she goes to his residence, pretending to be a reporter. Mrs. Munoz shows her the sketch of the entity which Gabriel had been seeing before his death. She also reveals that Gabriel started acting strange after he attended a conference. Rose starts asking questions about the name of the woman and reveals she also sees the entity. When Mrs. Munoz figures out that she's only pretending to be a reporter, she kicks her out of the house in anger. As her only option, Rose asks for Joel's help to find out the woman's name through old police records. Joel reluctantly agrees. Through security camera footage, they discover that the woman also witnessed a man committing the unthinkable, who also has the same terrifying smile on his face. After learning the connections between the cases, Rose returns home with all the evidence. She plans to show them to Trevor, only to find Dr. Madeline inside their house. Trevor explains that he was just concerned about her, but Rose berates him for refusing to believe in her despite being the person she should trust the most. She walks out of the house and then tries to convince her sister to believe her by showing her the evidence. Holly, however, dismisses her, saying how much she traumatized Jackson. Rose has no choice but to leave. Inside her car, Rose tries to calm herself down when Holly approaches her. Suddenly, Holly's head turns upside down. She's seeing things again. To release her frustration, she begins cursing and pounding the car while Jackson watches her from the window. At night, she receives a call from Joel, who explains that he dug deep into the cases and discovered that there are 20 more reported cases involving 19 suicides, which all happen in a pattern. However, one case stands out. It was of Robert Talley, who witnessed his business partner kill himself in front of him. 4 days later, Robert killed a woman he had never met before. After a week, the key witness to the murder committed suicide, and the pattern continued. Robert is still alive somehow and is in jail. Rose insists on talking to him as she believes she can get some answers from him. Rose introduces herself to Robert as the doctor of a patient who suffered the same. Robert refuses to tell her anything until Joel leaves, which the latter reluctantly does. Robert explains that he tried investigating what this thing could be and that there have been many incidents in the past. He managed to find a solution in Brazil where a man had broken the curse by killing his neighbor. To break the chain, Rose must kill someone and make sure that there is a witness to pass on the trauma. Robert says that the entity feeds on traumas. They're what gives it power. Rose accidentally reveals that she has the entity, causing Robert to go insane. He screams and tells her to get out, afraid that he might get it again. When Joel asks her what happened, she decides to keep it to herself. When she returns home, Dr. Madeline knocks on her door, insisting to check on her. Rose lets her in. In the middle of their conversation, the telephone rings. When Rose answers the phone, the real Dr. Madeline speaks on the other line, which means the person in front of her is the entity. Rose tries to run, but she's too scared to make it outside the house. The entity grabs her mouth and shrieks. The scene then shifts to the hospital, where Rose has parked her car. On the passenger seat is a knife. After hiding it inside her sleeve, she makes her way to Carl's room and repeatedly stabs him, following Robert's advice that she needs to kill someone to break the curse. But it turns out she's only hallucinating again. Suddenly, Dr. Desai knocks on the window and tells her it's dangerous for her to be alone. But Rose, remembering the cursed chain of trauma, realizes that she needs to be alone. She drives to their abandoned house where her mother died. As she settles for the night, she hears strange noises from her mother's bedroom. Inside, she sees her mother sitting on the bed. Rose's mother apologizes for not being a good mom, but asks her why she didn't help her and let her die. It's revealed that Rose saw her mother just before she died, but refused to call for help because she was afraid. Rose reveals that guilt will haunt her for the rest of her life. This in turn makes the entity a lot more powerful, capitalizing on her trauma to take over her mind. Her mother then turns into a tall creature that chases her through the hallway. Rose is caught off guard and is pinned down to the floor by the entity, but she manages to break its hand before using the gas lamp to hit its head. The entity catches on fire, and Rose makes it outside before the entire house burns. She drives back to the city and goes to Joel's apartment, apologizing for what happened between them in the past. She then asks if he could stay by her side while she sleeps, to which Joel agrees. However, the entire room grows dark as Joel smiles eerily. Rose is still under the influence of the entity. Joel runs after her and she tries to get out of the apartment, but winds up outside the abandoned house. Just then, the real Joel arrives, and in her horror, Rose runs inside the house and locks the door to protect Joel. She encounters the entity again. This time, it removes its skin, revealing its horrifying form before entering Rose's body through her mouth. Joel manages to get the door open just as Rose pours gasoline over her body. She then opens a matchbox and lights herself on fire, passing the curse to Joel. Despite her efforts, the curse remains. Thanks for watching, even though I'm a little bit sick. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and click here for another movie recap video. Thanks, guys.